All right. Well, good morning. Today is Thursday, June 27th. My name is Dave Hunsinger, and today I'm going to be talking about the transaction types in Keystroke. So it's kind of a lot of information. I'll try to cover a lot of ground and then look for your questions. It's pretty quiet right now. I haven't muted everybody except me, but I will if I start getting some background noise or if it doesn't sound right, but there's always chance for questions at the end. Remember Keystroke Live, 9 a.m., bright and early on the West Coast, every Thursday, same login information. Next week is 4th of July, so we're not going to be having Keystroke Live, and Mike Gebb will be there on the 11th of July for his first of the month webinar. And today I am talking about transaction types, and there are a variety of different transaction types in Keystroke, and the big thing about those is there are the default transaction types: invoice, order, on hold, layaway, and quote, and then some custom ones you can make. The whole idea of sales management is to track what you sell, and what you've sold when it leaves your building should be on an invoice. So an invoice is the record of goods sold. So when you sell something, you collect money for it, that is on an invoice, and that's kind of the goal of all the transactions, is to eventually make it an invoice that's the record of you collecting money and making money as a merchant. An order is a record of goods requested. So that's when you have a customer come, or a merchant has a customer come in and says, I want this, and I'm going to pick it up in 3 weeks, or you need to order it and bring it in, but it's a record of goods requested. When you complete an order, you're saying, okay, now I'm actually giving the merchandise to the customer, collecting payment, and the inventory items move from the order to an invoice, so it's a record of goods sold. An on hold is simply an invoice that doesn't have payments yet. So somebody forgot their wallet, or somebody calls you up and says, I'm going to come in later today and pick this up. You can create that on hold transaction. It's very similar to layaway, which layaway is basically you saying, I've got this item right here, but I'm going to put it on a special shelf and hold it for you. And you're maybe making incremental payments towards it, or coming in at a later date to pick it up. And then a quote is basically you giving people prices on items, and the way Keystroke's got it set up, you can do a lot with it. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody except me there, and move into Keystroke. And here we are. So here's just your typical invoice record of goods sold. Now I can hit Control O to switch it to an order, put a customer in. I won't use the existing sales order. And I can put some items on there. We'll put that on there, put that on there. So I can put a few items, and maybe they want 10 of these, and I'm shipping 0, and they only want 1 of these, and they'll take 5 Spider-Man DVDs. So this is my record of goods requested. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Then to bring it up, I can just hit the Control O to switch to order, and hit Control Page Up. Brings up my last sales order. And they came in and picked up the trays. So we'll say we'll ship 10 even though we don't have them all. And we'll just have them pay for it with a check. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I save this, it's going to take those items and create an invoice that's going to be number 44A, because it's the first invoice created by sales order 44. And that will be the records of goods sold. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now I'm on sales invoice. I can hit Control Page Up to pull up the last invoice. I can also go up to Transaction, Edit, Sales Invoice by Number, And there's my 44A at the bottom. I bring it up. It's got those items. You see up at the very top, sales invoice from sales order today. If I look at the payment, it's got the braces with the 627. That means the payment was transferred from an order to this invoice. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Now I can hit Control O and control page up, or I can also go transaction, edit, print, sales order by number, and there's my 44A. Now remember, there's always only one order, and you may have 10 invoices from that one order, but there's always one order. The A indicates I've created one invoice from that order so far. So I bring this up, and you see there's 0 on order for the letter tray because it's been completed. And we will go ahead and ship the QuickBooks and the Spider-Man and do a cash payment here. Save it. So now if I hit Control Page Up, I have invoice 44B, second invoice I've created from order 44, and invoice 44A, the first one I created. If I go up here and go edit, print, sales order by number, 44 is gone. It's been completed. So when I'm looking at sales order here, and this is how Keystroke is set up by default, and we'll take a look at how it all gets set up. But how it's set up by default is when an order is completed, it's moved to the archives. So what I see on this sales order list is just my outstanding orders. So it's only people I owe stuff to. I can look under archives. So when an order is completed, it's taken out of sales orders and moved to archives. And so there's my order 44. B indicates I've created 2 invoices from it in archives. Now, with these transaction types, there's a lot of setup you can do with it. And I'm going to move to the Configuration Manager. And I'm going to select Settings and Sales Transactions. And you'll see here are all my different transaction types listed out. And if I take a look at sales order, and all of these basically have the same options for setting up. You can turn it on and off. You can give it a name if you don't want to call it sales order. If you just want to call it order, you can take out the word sales. The ampersand, that's the keystroke hotkey indicator. So that means the character following it, or the O, is the hotkey. So when you're picking it from a list, you can just hit O to move to it immediately. Description, where it's getting the number from. So you can have different numbering schemes by default. Pretty much everything keys off of invoices except quotes have a separate numbering scheme. You can change it how you want it. You can have it saved in a separate data file. We don't necessarily recommend doing that except for recurring transactions, but if you want to, you can, and it will use KSTR and then that 3-digit abbreviation. And then how you want to post the payments when you go to the GL. And then there's a whole bunch of parameters and security levels down here. Now, old-time keystroke dealers, some of these used to be in the sales manager, and we moved them to the transaction types so you could make different transaction types act differently. Those are mostly the entry parameters, so you can have different columns appear, have the quantities automatically filled in or not automatically filled in. You can control a lot right here on how transactions are displayed and get entered. What the detail box is, that's the box in the bottom left corner, you can change. When you're fulfilling orders, how you want the on-order quantity to be updated, how you want the shipped quantity, that's these autofills. And if you never want to display the quantity only column, you can turn that off, but you have to have on order shipped. You can do total quantity, total shipped. There's a lot you can do here. Also, there's this customer history at the bottom, and what's important about this is sometimes in Sales Manager when you enter a customer, if you notice it's taking a long time, you could have, if I had a start date here of 1/1/1990, every time I pull up that customer, it's going to try to generate their sales order history for the past 13 years. If you've got hundreds of transaction files, that could take a certain amount of time. So you can come in here and basically turn all this off and set this to 0, so it's just today, and be good to go. And so it's not going to take you a long time. And then there are parameters on how the complete sale works, what's displayed, where the cursor stops. If you want to require a minimum payment on a sales order of 20%, you can do that as well. And then there are the update parameters. So what fields get updated with sales order, quantity allocated gets updated. With layaways, quantity layaway gets updated. Remember, once these get set up, you don't want to mess with them because you don't want orders to be updating quantity allocated for 6 months and then you turn that off and then it doesn't update them anymore because it'll get confused on what it was doing before and after. So just like payment types, sales transaction types, you want to get them set up and then keep them that way. You can also, I recommend you can run a report on transaction types and payment types and print it, save it to a file, print it out, put it in a folder, and if something ever doesn't seem to be working right, you can go in and pull that out and compare the two reports and say, hey, this is what changed. And then there is the save, and this is what I was talking about, that a sales order, when items are shipped, it gets converted to a sales invoice. So you can control this. Again, you can, I've taken a lot of support calls where people have messed with this, and it took me a little time to dig around and find out, oh, well, you have your sales invoices or your sales orders converting to on holds or something screwy happening. You can do things like if you use one of the custom types like service order, when it's done, it can be converted to a sales order, and then when the customer comes in, you can convert that sales order to an invoice. So you can do some things like that. It's basically just different categories to help keep things organized. Whether you want to print a new invoice, and then down here, this archive to, so this is saying when I complete a sales order, it's going to take it out of sales orders and put it in archive. There's some of these are really handy, like for quotes and orders, that you could reload the prices, because if it had been sitting out there for 6 months, prices might have gone up and you want to reload those prices so you get the current pricing going on. And then this is what you can manually convert to. Like an invoice, you might want to convert to a layaway or an on hold if people don't have the money right there and handy to pay for it all. And I am just going to cancel out of here. And then also remember, you do have security levels by transaction type. So if there's a jewelry store, say, for quotes, they can do whatever they want to. But on an invoice, you don't want them to put a line item on there and then take it off. So because each transaction type has its different security levels, you can make them all behave quite differently depending on what security you want and what the circumstances are. Go ahead and save my changes. Now, there are the standard types I talked about: invoice, layaway, order, quote, on hold. We also have a rental item, and how the rental is set up differently is it's basically when you create the rental, it pulls the items out of inventory. When you convert it to an invoice, it puts them back into inventory. And that's really the big main difference in this rental transaction type. And so you have to be careful what you use it for, because if you change it to something where you're actually selling items, you want to be sure it's not putting those inventory items back into the quantity on hand. Gift registry is another transaction type we set up that's a little bit different. And basically what it's doing is when you create an order, it's pretty much a sales order. And so a young couple about to get married might come into a gift shop and say, okay, here are the 50 items you want. You put them all on an order. and then their friends come in and say, okay, we want to get them these candlesticks. You fulfill the candlesticks, and it basically creates a new invoice, but prompts you to put a customer in there because it's not the new couple, it's Mr. Smith who's buying the candlesticks. So it just behaves a little bit differently, very similar to a sales order, but it makes it a lot easier to do that gift registry. And then we have, the other thing on this list, if you see these asterisks, that means they're enabled. So like when I looked at rental here, up at the top, the enable, I can turn that off without resetting everything. There's no asterisks now, and now it's not going to be available in the sales manager. And then we have the special order, service order, and not used, which are basically if you want to do something, if people have a different type of transaction, maybe a Christmas club, wine club, other things like that, you can set up these transactions that maybe they could even behave like sales orders or on hold or layaways or invoices even, but it just kind of gives you a different category to look them up, a way of grouping them almost. And then there's the archives. That's where the sales orders get moved. We also have the recurring charge in here, and if I look at the setup here, it looks a little different because we are putting it in its own data file and saving the payments there, because when you use our function to merge the transactions from recurring into invoices, it'll bring those payments over, authorize them, and you good to go. It will save as orders the ones that if the payment was refused. And then you call those people up to get answers on how to create those transactions. So all of this you can set up here in the configuration manager. There's a lot you can do here. It's something you don't necessarily want individual customers going in and messing with a lot, because you can greatly change the behavior of of Keystroke by changing the parameters here. I also mentioned, if I go into the report manager, here under tables, you can do sales transaction types. And so here's a report, just kind of, this is the summary report giving me how I've got all the sales transaction types set up. Remember, with a lot of Keystroke reports, I guess that's the only one we have in there. And then also it's good to do the payment types, again, to kind of have a record of what is actually being used, so that if something changes, you can go back and say, hey, here's the old transaction types report, here's the new transaction type report, let's compare them and see what changed. So that is a quick, I'm back in the sales manager here, that's a quick overview of how all those transaction types work. If I go back to my PowerPoint, we covered the customs with the wide variety of uses and those parameters in the configuration manager. If I go back into Keystroke, remember too here, there's these transaction parameters, and these will apply to all transactions, but we have some entry parameters here as well as what's in the configuration manager. So if you remember, there's those two sets of parameters that will control how things work. And with that, I am going to unmute everyone. And then, okay, I think I've got everybody unmuted. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them now. I can sit here and smile too.
Yeah. So if on the parameter screen over in setup,
in the configuration or in the sales manager?
Configuration manager, those date ranges for the customer history. If you use 04 today, you can use the minus, for for 1 year of history.
Yeah, like right here on customers, I've got -1 year.
Yes.
So it'll give me a year back on that customer. So you could do -1M if you just wanted a month.
Got it. That's what I figured. That's the way it would work. But
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure. Thank
Hey,
you.
Dave, it's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Can you expound upon reoccurring invoicing? Does it actually handle the payment, or does it just bring it up so you handle it?
No, it actually handles the payments. There is a new function that was in version 7 in the Sales Manager, special and process recurring transactions. And this are parameters to do the batch. And so typically what you're doing with KeyPay is you are saving encrypted credit card numbers in KeyPay, and then you're able to batch those transactions every month. It'll go through and authorize them. And so if all the credit cards are good and don't get declined, if you've got 50 in there, it'll create 50 new invoices for your items. A lot of what this in here for is we designed for wine clubs, because it might be $32.95 one month and then $29.95 the month and next month, and so you can change line items and totals so that it will authorize the correct amount each month.
No, thank you.
And there is pretty good F1 help here on this recurring transactions. Great. Well, if there are no more questions, everybody have a great Thursday and a great 4th of July, because we won't be seeing you. I'll just remind you again, no Keystroke Live on Thursday, the 4th of July. And also remember, this is the last week of our Buy Silver, Get Gold software maintenance promotion. So if you've got any customers interested in that, give us a call to let us know. And we are having a dealer training on August 3rd and 4th. That's a Saturday and Sunday at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. It is just prior to the RSPA convention. If you're not going to RSPA, that doesn't matter. You don't need a convention pass to come to our training, and we'd love to have you. Just give Nick a call if you need more details or have any questions. Thanks a lot for being here today.